June 29, 1974. In a small apartment near Hamburg, the last admiral of the Third Reich opened a thin gray book. Page 117. A single sentence, yet enough to shatter 30 years of certainty. He paused. His hand trembled. We read German signals almost as fast as the Germans themselves. The light from the window fell across his aging face, and what he saw was no longer ink on paper. It was 783 U-boats lost beneath the Atlantic. It was 30,000 sailors he believed had died because of radar, aircraft, or misfortune. Now he understood. The enemy had known every order since 1940. Every U-boat position, every tactic, every cipher change he once believed was unbreakable. Throughout the war, Germany trusted Enigma as an iron wall, absolute, mathematical, invincible. But that wall had already collapsed when the war truly began. For more than 4 years, they fought inside a darkness created not by the Allies, but by their own belief. Today, we enter one of the coldest truths of the Second World War. How the Allies read the strategic mind of Germany and why the Germans never knew. In every war, there is a front line made of steel, fire, and men. But there is another front that begins first, quiet, invisible, and decisive. For Germany in 1939, that front was cryptography. The Wehrmacht believed it possessed the most advanced encryption device ever created. A machine of rotors and mathematics, a puzzle of astronomical combinations, a symbol of German engineering that seemed untouchable. Enigma, a name that meant certainty, a name that meant protection. In Berlin, cryptographers assured the High Command, Enigma cannot be broken, the numbers will protect us. And on paper, they were right. The machine offered more combinations than the stars in the sky, more possibilities than any human could compute. But war is not fought on paper. War is fought by people, flawed, tired, careless, imaginative. And while Germany believed they had built an unbreakable wall, they never saw the slow cracks forming in Warsaw, Paris, and London. The story that followed was not a miracle. It was a chain reaction. Mathematicians, linguists, chess players, engineers, people who saw patterns where others saw certainty. When Germany invaded Poland, they captured cities, airfields, and armies. But there was one battlefield they never understood. A small room where Polish mathematicians passed their knowledge of Enigma to the British and French. A room that changed the fate of the Atlantic before the first U-boat ever left port. The Germans believed they were entering the war with a shield. They did not realize that the shield had already been pierced. For the German Navy, the coming conflict had a simple equation. Sink enough Allied shipping, and Britain would starve. Cut the supply line, and the British Empire would collapse from within. Force them to negotiate, and Germany would win without ever landing a soldier on British soil. It was a strategy built on numbers. Millions of tons of cargo, thousands of miles of ocean, hundreds of U-boats, dozens of convoys. But beneath those numbers was a single assumption: operational secrecy. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat arm, built his entire doctrine on the idea that Enigma protected every movement. Wolf packs were coordinated through long-range radio signals encoded by Enigma. Rendezvous locations, fuel resupply, attack patterns, all encrypted. Dönitz believed he could orchestrate the Atlantic War from shoreside headquarters as if he were moving pieces on a chessboard. He thought his moves were invisible. He thought he was the only player who understood the board. He was wrong on both counts. In training schools across Germany, young radio operators learned the rituals of Enigma, setting the daily key, adjusting rotor positions at midnight, guarding codebooks with their lives, destroying materials upon threat of capture. The discipline was absolute. The belief was unshakable. The machine was treated almost like a religious artifact, perfect, sacred, unquestionable. But this faith had a cost. It meant no one questioned anomalies. No one challenged assumptions. No one imagined that the Allies might adapt faster than German experts predicted. When supply ships were found in impossibly remote areas, reports blamed radar. When convoys zigzagged away from wolf packs with uncanny timing, officers blamed reconnaissance aircraft. When U-boats were caught surfacing at night, commanders blamed new Allied technology that should not exist. Anything was possible, except the idea that Enigma had failed. This was the core of the tragedy. Germany did not lose because they lacked intelligence. It lost because their intelligence refused to doubt itself. Across the channel, a different war was being fought. Bletchley Park, an old mansion turned intelligence factory, grew larger every month. Huts sprouted across the grounds like scars. Inside them, thousands of men and women worked in silence. Mathematicians, linguists, crossword champions, debutantes who had never seen war, engineers who dreamed of machines that did not yet exist. They were told only what they needed to know. They did not see the whole picture. But together they built the first great information weapon. Bombs, electromechanical engines that devoured Enigma settings. Colossus, the first programmable electronic computer in human history. Analysts who tracked operator habits, repeated phrases, and weather reports to narrow possibilities. The Allies did not break Enigma in a day. They broke it message by message, mistake by mistake, assumption by assumption. They industrialized cryptanalysis in a way Germany never imagined. And once the door opened, only a crack, it never closed again. By 1941, German U-boats were sinking convoys at an alarming rate. Merchant sailors called the waters off Ireland Torpedo Alley. Night attacks lit the ocean with fire. Wolf packs seemed unstoppable. In Berlin, Dönitz proudly reported, "The U-boat arm is decisively weakening British supply lines." But in secret, British naval intelligence was reading his orders almost in real time. They knew where the wolf packs gathered. They knew where supply submarines hid. They knew when U-boats were low on fuel, when they were regrouping, and when they were hunting. Britain acted selectively. Sometimes they struck. Sometimes they held back to protect the secret. To Germany, the pattern looked like luck. To the Allies, it was a controlled burn, a war not to destroy the enemy instantly, but to dismantle him systematically. Germany believed the Atlantic War was theirs to win. They did not realize that the real battle, the battle of intelligence, had already been lost. In early 1942, German U-boats seemed to dominate the Atlantic. The introduction of the four-rotor Enigma M4 gave the Germans renewed confidence. Dönitz was assured the machine was unbreakable. The math too vast, the combinations too many. But the Allies adapted, captured code books from U-110, intercepted short signal procedures, Polish foundations, improved bombs, Colossus machines analyzing traffic at speeds Germany believed impossible. The breakthrough came quietly. There was no single moment, no single message, just an increasing clarity, a tightening net, an intelligence picture becoming whole. And then, convoys stopped dying at the rate Germany expected. Wolf packs found empty seas. Resupply submarines were ambushed with surgical precision. Something felt wrong, but in Berlin, the answer was always the same. Enigma is secure. Victory requires patience. Patience would prove fatal. By late 1942 and early 1943, the signs were undeniable. Convoys evaded wolf packs by margins too perfect to be coincidence. Aircraft found U-boats in stormy darkness. Escorts intercepted transmissions faster than German operators believed possible. Fuel submarines, the lifeline of long-range operations, were destroyed at their secret rendezvous points. Reports flowed upward through German intelligence channels. Questions were raised, investigations began, but all of them shared the same flaw. They started with the assumption that Enigma was secure, and so they ended with the same conclusion. The enemy must possess a new radar system. Aircraft range has improved unexpectedly. We are victims of unfortunate coincidence. The truth was never considered, and because of that, the truth would hit like a hammer in the years to come. By early 1943, the U-boat fleet was larger than ever before. Over 100 submarines patrolled the Atlantic. Dönitz believed he was finally close to breaking Britain's supply line. He wrote, "The enemy shows signs of exhaustion. One more push may decide the war." But in the encrypted silence of Bletchley Park, analysts were reading his optimism, line by line, order by order. They watched Germany prepare its greatest blow, and they prepared the counterstroke. Hunter-killer groups steamed into position. Escort carriers spread aircraft across the ocean. Convoys were redirected like pieces on a chessboard. When the storm came, Germany believed they were about to win. They were instead marching into the jaws of their greatest defeat. Every factor that would destroy the U-boat fleet was now in place. Ultra-decrypts feeding exact Wolfpack positions to Allied commanders. Long-range aircraft sealing the mid-Atlantic gap. Radar improving, sonar expanding, hedgehog mortars increasing kill rates. Depth charges becoming more accurate. A convoy system that no longer cracked under pressure. But none of this was the real turning point. The real turning point was psychological. Germany still believed it was winning. The Allies knew Germany was losing. In war, that difference is fatal. The stage was set, the pieces were moving, and the Battle of the Atlantic, one of the longest wars ever fought, was approaching its decisive moment. As spring 1943 approached, the German U-boat fleet sailed with confidence, discipline, and unwavering faith in their encrypted world. But they were not sailing into the Atlantic. They were sailing into history, toward a month the Germans would later call Black May. A month in which everything they believed would collapse. A month in which Ultra revealed its full power. A month in which the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively decided. The prelude had ended. The storm was about to begin. By early 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had reached a strange equilibrium. Germany believed victory was close. Britain believed it had survived the worst. The ocean, indifferent and vast, waited for the next shift. The turning point would not arrive with a single battle, but through a chain of events, tiny signals, intercepted transmissions, subtle adjustments, each one pushing Germany into a corner it still could not see. Inside Donitz's headquarters, optimism ran high. The U-boat fleet was larger than ever. The new four-rotor Enigma M4 had restored confidence in cipher security. Wolfpacks moved with precision, yet beneath that surface, British codebreakers had done what German mathematicians believed impossible. They had mastered the M4. The breakthrough came quietly, not with triumph, but with exhaustion. Analysts hunched over endless printouts, engineers listening to the hum of bombs, and Colossus machines cycling through possibilities. By March 1943, Ultra was again reading U-boat traffic fast enough for Allied naval commanders to act on it. Germany believed the ocean was theirs. But the truth was this: the turning point had already arrived. April 28, 1943. Convoy OS-5, carrying 42 merchant ships from Liverpool to Halifax, moved westward across cold gray waters. U-650 spotted it first and sent a short encrypted burst. Within seconds, the signal reached Donitz. Within minutes, it reached Bletchley Park. Donitz responded with precision. Concentrate Wolfpack's Amsel, Star, and others. Prepare for coordinated night attack. But Ultra decoded the order almost immediately. The message traveled from Hut 8 to the Admiralty, from the Admiralty to escort commanders, and then to the convoy itself. While Germany prepared the trap, Britain prepared the counterstroke. 6 days of brutal fighting followed. 13 merchant ships were sunk, but 7 U-boats were destroyed. For the first time in the war, the exchange favored the Allies. It was a small victory. But it was the beginning of something much larger, the collapse of the U-boat arm. In Berlin, the data seemed confusing. How could so many submarines be lost in areas once considered safe? The answer was in front of them. The enemy knew where they were. Always, but that possibility remained unthinkable. While Germany depended on Wolfpacks, the Allies introduced a new concept: small, fast, and deadly hunter-killer groups. These groups centered around escort carriers like USS Bogue. They were mobile strike forces designed not to defend convoys, but to seek and destroy U-boats directly. Ultra fed them positions. Radar and sonar guided them in. Depth charges tore open steel hulls in black water. In 6 weeks, USS Bogue alone sank 6 U-boats. Suddenly, the hunters had become the hunted, and Germany did not understand why. Throughout May 1943, Wolfpacks attempted attack after attack. Each time, the result was the same. Convoys that should have been defenseless turned away. Escorts appeared out of darkness with impossible timing. Aircraft found submarines in places where aircraft should not have been. Refueling submarines, vital milk cows, were ambushed at their exact coordinates. In headquarters across occupied Europe, German officers grew uneasy. Statisticians recorded patterns that defied probability. Field commanders raised questions. Submarine captains wrote confused reports. And yet, every time suspicion threatened to surface, the same reassurance crushed it. Enigma is mathematically secure. No one dared contradict the numbers. No one imagined that thousands of British personnel, armed with primitive but ingenious machines, could outmatch an equation that appeared undefeatable. The turning point had become a downward spiral, and still Germany refused to see it. May 1943. A month remembered by U-boat veterans with a single phrase, Black May. In 31 days, 41 U-boats were destroyed. Nearly 1/4 of all submarines at sea never returned. Several went down with every single man aboard. Others vanished without sending a final signal. Convoys like HX-237 and SC-130 crossed the Atlantic with minimal losses while inflicting disproportionate damage on wolf packs. Every engagement pointed to the same conclusion. The Allies knew too much, but German intelligence insisted the explanation was new centimetric radar, new aircraft patrols, new direction-finding equipment, unusual luck. Any answer except the obvious one. By the end of the month, Dönitz wrote in his war diary, "We have lost the Battle of the Atlantic." But he did not understand why. He believed Allied air power had simply become overwhelming. The truth, ultra, remained outside his imagination. On May 24, 1943, Dönitz transmitted the order that ended Germany's dream of strangling Britain. Withdraw from the North Atlantic convoy routes. Regroup southwest of the Azores. It was a moment of grim clarity for the U-boat arm. After years of ambition, sacrifice, and innovation, the dream died quietly, not in a blaze of naval battle, but through a withering realization. The Atlantic was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. Submarine crews were exhausted. Commanders were lost. New recruits died faster than they could be trained. Still, no one knew that the cause of the collapse, the silent force guiding every Allied attack, was a group of cryptanalysts working behind locked doors in an English estate. In withdrawing, Germany admitted defeat, but they withdrew from the wrong enemy. They thought radar beat them. They thought aircraft beat them. They thought brute force beat them. What defeated them had no uniform, no rank, no battlefield. It was information. It was ultra. The turning point was not only military, it was psychological. For years, U-boat crews believed they held the initiative. They called the ocean the hunting ground. They saw convoys as prey. But after Black May, that belief died. Now every message from headquarters felt dangerous. Every surfacing felt like a risk. Every rendezvous felt compromised. Submariners whispered theories in cramped quarters. The British must have a new kind of radar. They must have spies in every port. Someone must be betraying positions. No one said the unthinkable. Maybe Enigma is broken. To question Enigma was to question the foundation of the naval war. It was to admit the unimaginable, that Germany had been fighting blind. So the silence continued, and so did the losses. By the end of 1943, it was clear the U-boat war was no longer a contest. It was a rout. The Allies dominated the air. Carrier groups closed the mid-Atlantic gap. Escort vessels multiplied. Anti-submarine weapons improved monthly. Long-range patrol aircraft hunted submarines even in waters once considered unreachable. And yet none of those advancements mattered as much as one truth. The Allies always knew where the U-boats were or where they were going. It was not foresight. It was not luck. It was not technological superiority. It was the result of reading thousands of decrypted messages. It was the product of a system so well hidden that not a single German officer detected it during the war. The turning point had become the breaking point, and from that moment on, the U-boat arm would never recover. When historians look back at the Battle of the Atlantic, they sometimes describe it as a battle of machines. U-boats against convoys, submarines against aircraft, torpedoes against sonar. But the true battle was fought far from the ocean. It was fought in quiet rooms filled with papers and wires. It was fought by people who never touched a weapon. It was won by knowledge, not firepower. For Germany, the tragedy was profound. They lost a war they believed they were winning. They fought with discipline, courage, and innovation, but they fought without the one thing they needed most: secrecy. The turning point of the war was not a clash of fleets. It was a shift in understanding. The Allies understood the U-boats. The U-boats never understood the Allies. By the end of 1943, the turning point was complete. The Atlantic, once the strategic hope of the Third Reich, became its silent destroyer. The U-boat fleet continued to fight with admirable resolve, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Germany still believed their cipher was secure. They still believed their commands were invisible. They still believed mathematics protected them. But the war was no longer shaped by belief. It was shaped by truth. Truth extracted from signals, patterns, electromechanical machines, and human persistence. When the turning point closed, it closed forever. The U-boat war died not with an explosion, but with a realization that never came. They were being read every day, every hour, every order, and because they never knew, they never had a chance. Armies can survive defeat. What destroys them is misunderstanding why they are defeated. For Germany, from 1942 onward, every loss arrived with an explanation, and every explanation was wrong. Radar improvements, aircraft patrols, a chance, weather, equipment failure. Everything made sense, except the truth. Within the Kriegsmarine, officers were not afraid of danger. They were afraid of meaninglessness, of events that refused to fit into any tactical logic, of anomalies that forced them to invent causes rather than confront reality. What they were facing was not a battlefield failure. It was the consequence of an invisible breach. The enemy was reading their thoughts. But no one inside the German system could imagine such a thing. Imagine you are the commander of a German U-boat in 1943. You spend the day submerged, rationing oxygen. At night you surface to recharge batteries, taking in the cold air as the diesel engines rumble to life. Every night, without fail, just when you think the sky is empty, a British aircraft appears. A searchlight cuts through the darkness. The ocean erupts with depth charges, and it happens again and again and again. You followed the orders precisely. You adhered to radio silence. You changed your patterns. You believed you were hidden. But the enemy always finds you. A sense of being hunted settles in the crew. An unspoken dread that cannot be placed. Some commanders wrote in their logs, "They see through the ocean. There is no logic. We are prey in waters that no longer follow natural rules." The men whispered theories. New radar, new aircraft, luck. Anything but the truth. Their encrypted messages were being read hours after they sent them. But no commander dared consider that. To question Enigma was to question the foundation of their war. And fear, when tied to belief, becomes a cage. By late 1942, reports began piling up. U-boats ambushed in remote sectors. Wolf packs intercepted before attacking. Supply submarines attacked at precise rendezvous points. Convoys maneuvering as if guided by unseen hands. Admiral Erhard Mertens, head of naval cryptanalysis, was tasked with explaining these anomalies. And he did explain them, but he explained them through a belief he shared with every German officer. Enigma is unbreakable. Thus his conclusions were comforting. Allied radar improved. Long-range patrols expanded. Direction-finding stations increased. Operational coincidences occurred. The one hypothesis that fit all the facts, that encrypted communications were compromised, was dismissed immediately. Not because the logic was wrong, but because the belief system was too rigid to allow it. The prison was not mathematical, it was psychological. Here is the tragic irony. Germany's skill at breaking Allied codes blinded them to the possibility that their own could be broken. The B-Dienst, Germany's naval signals intelligence service, was highly competent. They cracked Allied codes. They provided valuable naval intelligence. Their successes became a point of pride, and from pride came a fatal assumption. If it takes us enormous effort to break Allied ciphers and we still struggle, then the enemy cannot possibly break Enigma, which is far more complex. This assumption was repeated in briefing rooms, in classrooms, in officer training, in the strategic reports. One cryptanalyst wrote, "If Enigma has been broken, then our understanding of cryptography is fundamentally flawed." No one wanted to entertain that possibility, so they rejected it before examining it. Because doubt is harder to accept than defeat. In early 1943, as U-boat losses mounted, Dönitz ordered a full investigation. Experts examined radar emissions, METOX behavior, signal discipline, aircraft tracking, convoy patterns, wireless triangulation, operator mistakes. But the investigation began with an assumption. Enigma is secure, and therefore it concluded with, the British have discovered a way to detect METOX signals. This was comforting. It shifted the blame to technology, not cryptography. It provided an answer, even if it was wrong. In response, Dönitz ordered U-boats to stop using METOX. Ultra read that order. And the Allies immediately knew U-boats were now blind to radar. Losses increased. Germany blamed technology again. The real cause remained untouched. A soldier can endure hardship, a sailor can accept danger, but no one can endure uncertainty that never ends. From 1943 onward, U-boat crews fought not only the enemy, but a growing sense of incomprehension. Why were aircraft appearing in storms? Why did convoys shift course minutes after U-boat sightings? Why were refueling submarines being annihilated with such precision? Why were wolf packs being outmaneuvered before they even assembled? Every explanation they were given felt thin. The real reason, that the enemy read their orders, would have made everything make sense. But that idea was forbidden. So the confusion deepened, and confusion is a form of psychological torture. One commander wrote, "We are no longer fighting a war. We are reacting to something we cannot understand." That was the real hell. Inside German bunkers, officers reviewed data late into the night. Some reports were impossible to ignore. Escort groups appear too quickly. Convoys evade before we approach. U-boat locations seem known in advance. One intelligence officer quietly suggested, "There may be an unknown factor." His superior replied, "We cannot base conclusions on factors we cannot identify." That response reveals everything. Ultra was invisible because the German system refused to imagine an answer that threatened its core assumptions. Germany faced an enemy who knew their every move. But because that seemed impossible, they dismissed it. You cannot solve a puzzle if you begin by rejecting the correct answer. High-ranking officers in Berlin analyzed reports and drew charts. But the men who sensed the truth earliest were those underwater. They experienced the war directly. Convoys reacting with unnatural precision. Escorts appearing where no escort should be. Aircraft emerging from darkness as if following a schedule. Refueling meetings interrupted with uncanny timing. Commanders wrote, "The enemy knows our intentions." But they always followed with, "Yet this cannot be." They stood at the door of truth, but belief kept the door locked. It was not stupidity, it was indoctrination. They had been told that Enigma was perfect, and perfect things do not fail. Life inside a U-boat was already brutal. Stifling air, claustrophobic pressure, constant fear, sudden shocks from depth charges, long stretches of silence broken by panic. But the greatest pressure came from not understanding. Each time a message was sent, radio operators wondered, "Did I just reveal our position?" They never said it aloud. Fear of being wrong was stronger than fear of death. Fatigue eroded discipline. Uncertainty eroded morale. Morale eroded decision-making. This was how the U-boat fleet truly died, not through destruction, but through mental collapse rooted in a hidden truth. In August 1943, neutral Switzerland issued a warning. German naval ciphers may be compromised. This should have been a turning point, a moment of revelation, a chance to stop the bleeding. Instead, Germany reviewed the warning, analyzed it, dismissed it. Why? Because accepting it meant accepting total strategic failure. To believe Enigma was broken would mean the entire U-boat campaign was doomed. Every command decision for years was flawed. Thousands of lives were lost for nothing. The enemy had outsmarted Germany at its most sacred point, engineering. No system, no matter how rational, willingly embraces a truth so devastating. By spring 1945, Dönitz still believed radar defeated him, aircraft defeated him, Allied industry defeated him. He never suspected Ultra. At Nuremberg, when asked, "Did you ever consider your cipher might be compromised?" He answered, no, it was impossible. Even after Ultra was revealed in 1974, he wrote that he still found it hard to believe. His tragedy is clear. He built an entire war on a foundation he never questioned. And he lost because he trusted that foundation too much. The hell Germany endured was not the destruction of its fleets. It was the destruction of its certainty. The Kriegsmarine suffered because it trusted Enigma absolutely. It rejected uncomfortable explanations. It followed data only when the data aligned with beliefs. It ignored the one possibility that explained everything. They lost not because they lacked talent or bravery. They lost because they were blind to the one truth that shaped the war. The hell within was not fire. It was ignorance. It was misplaced faith. It was the quiet, crushing weight of a reality no one dared confront. And by the time they learned the truth, it was decades too late. By spring 1945, deep inside the bunkers beneath Berlin, the war was no longer about strategy. It was about understanding collapse. The German high command watched fronts crumble, cities vanish, and communication lines fail. But the question that haunted them was not, how do we win? It was, why did we lose so quickly? For the U-boat arm, the end was even more surreal. Some submarines were ordered to surrender while still submerged. Some never resurfaced at all. Others received what would be their final message from Donitz. Short, restrained, and heavy with resignation. Across the fleet, the same feeling spread. Not rage, not defiance, but a long, slow bewilderment that had begun years earlier and never found an answer. No one spoke of Enigma. No one doubted Cypher's security. No one examined the possibility that their most trusted weapon had betrayed them. Even as the Reich collapsed, belief survived, and belief can outlive nations. When Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945, Karl Donitz became the last leader of the Third Reich. He did not inherit a nation, he inherited ruins. Yet even at this late hour, his orders to the military emphasized maintain discipline, protect classified materials, preserve cipher integrity. He still believed the enemy had defeated him through material strength, planes, ships, factories, not through the collapse of his communications. But by the time he issued these orders, the Allies had already been reading his most sensitive messages for 4 years. Even in defeat, the truth remained hidden from him. And because he never understood the real cause of his failure, he could not understand the fall of the system he led. When German officers were interrogated at Nuremberg and Allied intelligence centers, one question emerged repeatedly. Did you ever suspect your cipher had been broken? Almost every officer responded the same way. No. It was impossible. There was never any indication. They were sincere. They were also wrong. Ultra left no traces because it was designed to leave none. Allied commanders held back attacks that would have revealed their knowledge. Analysts avoided acting on certain decrypts to preserve secrecy. The entire war was shaped by a single principle: protect Ultra at all costs. As a result, Germany spent the war explaining defeats with incorrect theories, each one reinforcing their blindness. After more than 1,000 interrogations, the Allies reached a remarkable conclusion. Germany never knew Ultra existed. After 1945, millions of Allied wartime documents were sealed. Ultra remained the most guarded secret of the British government. Historians wrote volumes without ever mentioning it. German officers wrote memoirs based on incomplete information. Strategic analyses built entire theories around false assumptions. For nearly 3 decades, the men who had commanded U-boats or directed operations lived with unanswered questions. Questions that gnawed at their sense of competence and identity. Why were their plans always countered? Why did wolf packs fail in ways that defied logic? Why did the war turn so sharply in 1943? None of them were given the answer. The truth was not merely hidden. It was buried so deeply that it reshaped the history of the war for an entire generation. When Group Captain F.W. Winterbotham published The Ultra Secret in 1974, it detonated like a bomb in the historical community. For the first time, the public learned, the Allies had read Enigma for years. They knew the positions and intentions of U-boats. They shaped convoy routes with near-perfect intelligence. The Battle of the Atlantic had been decided long before Germany realized it. For many readers, this was fascinating history. For surviving German officers, it was an emotional earthquake. They had spent decades analyzing the war through the wrong lens. Now they discovered that the foundation of their understanding was false. This was not just a strategic revelation, it was a personal one. It meant their decisions were doomed from the start. Their tactical brilliance had been neutralized by an unseen adversary. Their losses were not the result of failure, but of an information imbalance they never knew existed. It was a truth difficult to accept because it explained everything. When Dönitz finally read the revelation, he was shaken. He wrote, "If this is true, it explains completely the collapse of the U-boat arm." For 30 years, he had believed the U-boats failed because of Allied radar, aircraft, and overwhelming production. Now he understood. Every wolf pack he formed, every course change he ordered, every supply rendezvous he planned, every cipher he trusted, had been exposed to the Allies within hours. This was not just a strategic defeat. It was a moral and psychological one. He had led thousands of men into a battle where the enemy always knew their moves, and he did not know it. No revelation could be more devastating to a commander. After 1974, two opposing reactions emerged within Germany's surviving wartime community. A sense of liberation. Many officers finally understood. They had not been incompetent. Their tactics had not been outdated. Their mistakes had not been uniquely theirs. They had been fighting an enemy who saw everything. This realization washed away decades of guilt and confusion. A sense of destruction. But the same truth carried a darker meaning. All tactical analysis since the war was invalid. All conclusions in their memoirs were incomplete. All lessons they believed they had learned were built on false assumptions. The war they remembered was not the war that actually happened. Truth gave them clarity, but it also took away the foundation of their understanding. For some, this was unbearable. Ultra revealed a principle deeper than cryptography. The strongest army does not win. The army that understands the battlefield wins. Germany lost because it trusted technology without questioning it. It dismissed uncomfortable possibilities. It believed mathematics could not be defeated by human creativity. It confused complexity with security. It underestimated the persistence and imagination of its enemies. Ultra was not a miracle. It was the triumph of curiosity over certainty. It was the victory of doubt over arrogance. War rewards those who question their assumptions. Germany did not. Many former U-boat officers later wrote that the haunting part of the war was not the battles, but the moments they could never explain. They remembered convoys slipping away at precise moments, aircraft appearing from nowhere, escorts steering toward them without warning, rendezvous turning into traps. After 1974, they finally understood why. One veteran said in 1980, "We fought a war we could never win, and the worst part is that we never knew." The ocean had been vast, but their world had been small, bounded not by steel or water, but by belief. Ultra did not end the war alone, but it shaped every decision, every convoy, every movement across the Atlantic. It exposed the limits of German confidence. It revealed how dangerous a single assumption can be, and it demonstrated that silence, carefully maintained, relentlessly protected, can be deadlier than bombs. When Dönitz finally understood the truth in 1974, he realized something profound. The war had not ended for him in 1945. It had ended the day he learned that everything he believed during the war had been incomplete. Germany was not defeated by force alone. It was defeated by insight, by information, by the minds inside Bletchley Park. A war fought in darkness ended with a revelation of light, and in that revelation lay the greatest tragedy of all. They never knew the enemy had been inside their thoughts.